We are coming into Inktober here, and so in encouraging you to draw as often as you can, up to every day during this month, I want to give you some basics before we jump full steam into our next project next week. So to start off today, you're going to need some scratch paper. I'd grab some of that tan paper, and then you'll need a pencil as well. Might want to grab an eraser also. Feel free to pause the video and get all those supplies. I'm going to keep moving right along. So, we are going to be doing some ink blot monsters here soon. In order to do that, I want to review and give you some basics for drawing different parts and pieces of those so that you feel like you can be prepared and then you'll have good success. To start off, all good drawings start with a combination of simple shapes. And kids never believe me on this, so I'm going to show you a little bit of what I mean. So whatever you're drawing, if you break it down to its most basic form, probably consists of circles, squares, rectangles, triangles, these basic shapes and lines that you're familiar with. If we want to draw a robot, for example, we could start off with a circle. This could be the head, this could be the body. In our case, let's say it's the body. And then for the head, maybe we want another circle. But this time I'm going to mix it up. I'm going to do just a half circle. And so we're going to start off here. We'll say this is the head. Then for the legs, let's do a couple of triangles. I'm going to attach them right here. And I'm going to have the other one back here. For an arm, we can do a long, thin rectangle. And another long, thin rectangle over here. We could even put circles on the end for hands. And we need some sort of a neck. And we have a really basic robot. There's a couple of things we can do to make this look more realistic or more interesting. So I'm going to show you that real quickly, and then we'll break down what it is that takes this from our simple shapes and makes it into a more interesting drawing. So we can add a little bit of detail here and make this more three-dimensional. We can add a few little details like eyes to our robot right here. We'll add a little bit of shading in a moment so that it looks like our robot isn't flat. Add a little bit of shading right here. We'll have a place where his neck enters his body here. Add a little bit of texture to that. Again, you can be drawing along with me for this, but don't expect to be able to do all this yet. We're going to go over it together, so don't stress out about any of that. I'm just showing you really quickly how to take this from basic shapes into a more interesting final piece. And with a little bit of shading here, our robot starts to look a lot more realistic. So how do we take it from the simple shapes, our circle, our rectangles, our smaller circles, our half circle, and triangles, and make this robot into a more interesting piece like this? We're going to start by using those elements of art we've been talking about for the past few weeks, starting with space. So one of the ways to show space in a two-dimensional drawing, meaning a flat drawing, and we want it to look 3D, is to have things that overlap. So on our robot up here, the arms overlap his body. So that's a quick and easy way to give the illusion of space in your drawing. So if you draw an arm, and then you have something behind it, our brain tells us, well, this arm or this rectangle must be in front of that circle because you don't see the line through it and it overlaps. We can increase that illusion by adding in ends of it here, and then we could even show, well, what if the hand was sticking out in front of that? And I can grab my eraser and fill in this point. And now we've got a couple of overlapping sections, so it looks like this arm is coming out of the circle and hidden behind this. So overlapping is one way to use the element of art space to give a 3D look. You can also see this if we were to do squares. And of course I'm not finishing these yet. But now if we finish out these squares and have them overlapping, you don't have to think about it. You know that this square is in front, then the second square is farther back, and this third square is the farthest back. Okay? That is because they're overlapping. Another way that we can show space, or 3D in an image, is to use perspective. So that means the farther away things get from you in a drawing, the smaller they get, and they all tend to go back to central points. So if we have a path here, it's going to decrease in the distance until it's just a little end point. And then if this were a road, say, you're going to have longer lines that are closer to you, and as they get farther back, they're going to get shorter and shorter and shorter. Okay? If you were to do this with objects, you can combine it with overlapping to really increase the illusion of depth, the illusion of a three-dimensional drawing. And the way you do that is you start in the front with a big object, like a circle. And remember, you can be practicing these along with me. They don't need to look perfect. It's just a rough sketch so you can see these ideas. And then there will be another circle behind it. We're going to draw it overlapping. We're also going to make it a little bit smaller because it's going away from us. I'm going to draw another one here. It's overlapped again and smaller still. If you keep doing this with smaller overlapping circles, your brain is telling you this is going back into the distance. Even though this is a flat drawing, we're using that technique of overlapping. We're using that idea of perspective, where things are getting smaller the further away they get from you, and that makes it look like these circles are going back into the drawing. Those two concepts are what make up foreshortening. So foreshortening is a fancy art word that says the closer something is to you, it's bigger, and then the farther away something is, it's smaller. So if we have this robot arm that's a rectangle, that's got a ball here for the hand, and it connects to the ball for a body. Let me change that slightly. What if we were looking sideways at an arm, and it had one ball on the end, and you connected that to another ball on this end? So this is the sideways view of an arm. Think of it as, here's your fingers. So if you turn this so that someone is pointing their hand right at you, what you're going to see, like if someone's getting ready to give you a high five, here would be our hand. Okay, it's nothing fancy. And then the arm, because of perspective, would get smaller. And then this circle down here that's the end of the arm, that would be much smaller down here. So this is close to you. It's a larger circle. It's the hand. And then as that arm goes back, it narrows down because of perspective. You know, a smaller circle back here. So this is smaller. This is larger because it's closer to you. That's foreshortening. You don't have to know this term, but it's a fun art term to impress people. So, to review, everything we're doing starts with simple shapes. We're using the element of art, space, to make things look more three-dimensional, to give them more depth. And three of the ways we're doing that is we're overlapping objects, we're using perspective, and those two things together, overlapping and perspective, combine the fancy art term of foreshortening, which means the closer something is to you, the larger it is, and then it gets smaller as it moves away from you in your drawing. So take these three elements, or these three techniques that are within the element of art space. We're going to flip our page over here. You may not need to because you probably still have space. We're going to talk real quick about value. So remember, drawing our robot here again, we have our head. It's connected with a little rectangle there, and we're going to overlap those, practicing that element of art for space. And we will have an arm over here coming out from this side closest to us. And I'm going to make that a little smaller. And I'm going to make that kind of a cone shape with a bigger hand here because of foreshortening. So we're saying that's closer to us. Then there's an arm back here. We're going to say that's farther away. So I'm going to make it narrow a little bit. And I'm going to put a smaller circle down there for this hand. So it looks like this hand is closer to us, this hand is farther away. We're going to do the same thing with his leg. We're going to overlap, make a smaller triangle there for this leg, and we're going to come over here and overlap and make a bigger triangle here for this leg that's closer to us. I'll erase this so that we can overlap some more. Now just a quick tip, when you have pieces connecting like this, one of the ways that you can do that is if you draw a curved line, it looks like, I might need to make this a little darker, it looks like your leg is going into this sphere. And then if you really want to have fun, make a little mark back this way, and now it looks like that leg is going inside of whatever this object is here. Kind of a fun tip. Because this is a cone, not a triangle, instead of going straight across, we're going to do a slightly curved line like this. And I would see the bottom of this because I'm pretending like I'm looking up on this robot. And so what that means is this will turn into an oval. So now you can see the bottom of this cone. This is taking a shape and giving it form. So you're taking a shape that's 2D, a triangle, and you're making it look 3D by giving it shape this way and by adding value, which remember is the change from light to dark. So if we make this side a little darker, now this cone looks three-dimensional. Same thing over here. We're going to pretend like our light is over here. Here's our little sun to remind us of that. So it's shining down this way, which means it'll be light right here, and it will be shaded in here and shaded along here. This is a practice page, so just try this out. It doesn't matter if you make a mistake. And then the bottom would be hidden from that light, so this would be darker where his foot is, or her foot, I suppose. So we are taking this basic shape that used to be a triangle, we're giving it form by adding value, changing from the dark to the light, and by giving it a little bit more of a three-dimensional look with these curves. Let's do that to the rest of the robot real quick. I'm not going to spend a long time on this. So our foreshortened arm, I'm going to bring those up, show where they overlap with our hand that's a sphere. I'm going to make sure I erase those extra pieces I don't need. I'm going to draw a little curve right here which shows that it's attached to his body. I'm going to add just a little bit of shading in here. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on this. And then we'd add a bit of shading along the bottom of the arm. I'm going to make this a bit darker. This leg back here, you wouldn't see the bottom of that. And this whole leg would be a little bit in shadow. I'll darken in his body, or her body, I suppose. And I would see the underside of the head, and so I'm going to make this curved slightly. I'm going to turn that into an oval, and then I'm practicing that overlapping again. Notice how I'm not crossing the neck. And I'll do a slight curve there. And we'll finish off this side. Darken these lines for the neck. Add a little bit of shading over on the right hand side since our light is on the left. We're going to shade under the head because that wouldn't get sunlight. We're going to shade along the bottom of this arm. Just lightly. We're going to shade along the bottom of this orb or sphere. And we're going to shade along the bottom right side, I should say bottom and right side of the body here. And I'm going to give a little bit more shading on this. And I'm going to shade a tiny bit along this edge so that we have a lighter spot here. I could even come in and make this a little bit darker. It's kind of hard to see on the screen, I know. And if I wanted to add some eyes, I could do that by overlapping those, just making kind of an upside down U shape. Use a curve to attach those, and then I'm just going to take advantage of this line in here and draw in a dark little pupil there. Okay? And so we've got a pretty good looking 3D robot here. So, we're not making robots. What we're going to be making is monsters. I'm noticing this video is getting a little bit long, so I'm probably going to pause here. We'll do a quick review, and then I'll make a second video if you have time for it. So, to review. We start with simple shapes. Circles, rectangles, squares, triangles. You can even do hexagons or other fun shapes. You take those shapes, kind of smash them together to make something you like. Then we're going to create more of a 3D image using a few simple steps. We'll start by applying the element of art space. We'll overlap different pieces to show what's in front and what's in back. We're going to use perspective, which means that as things get farther away, they're narrowing back and they're getting smaller. And in art, we call that foreshortening, which means that if we have like an arm here, the backmost part of it is going to be smaller, and then our perspective tells us that we have to have that arm coming out, and then the closest part of that hand here is larger. Then you'll take all that, combine it on a shape, add some value by thinking about where is your light, adding shadow on the opposite side, and then giving it a little more form so that if you see underneath a piece like this, make sure to show the bottom of that three-dimensional shape. And I forgot to add some shading on his head. And so I'm going to come in here and add a little bit of shading here. I'm going to darken up these lines to finish this up. And we might have a little bit of shadow under those eyes from the light. And we've got a three-dimensional robot. So, I'm going to call this good, and if you have time, watch video number 2, where I talk a little bit about how we're going to make monsters.